Hello, and welcome to today's session on social justice. This is a very interesting topic and one I'm very passionate about because it really looks at advocacy, not only for one particular group of students, but all students. You'll find in this presentation that actually social justice is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of different concepts and things we've been talking about throughout the semester. So in order to get us started with this topic, I want you to think about your own life and experiences and what's been going on with you, and then we're going to link that back to social justice throughout the presentation. So for this first part of the video, I'd like you to grab a piece of paper, and you're going to make a T-chart. And on the T-chart, you're going to have, I have on the bullet point here, our news, but it's actually your news. So you're going to put on the left-hand side of your T-chart, my, and on the right-hand side, news. And then on the left-hand side of the chart, you're going to bullet 3 to 4 key things that are happening in your life right now. So for example, for me, one of the key things obviously is working from home. I'm also helping to educate my 8th grader. She's doing Zoom sessions. She's doing lots of online work, but we need to support her with additional work that she can't complete during these Zoom sessions. So we're doing a lot of that with her. I'm also taking care of my husband and brother. As you can see, I have a note there that both are at higher risk because my husband has diabetes, as does my brother. My brother has also had a kidney transplant. He's living with us now. So we have to be extra careful to take care of these two really important people in our lives and make sure they stay safe. So we're trying our best to really practice that social distancing. It's been good because we have each other, but it's also a little trying at times because I think we get on each other's nerves, but we're doing the best we can. And I'm sure all of you are doing the best you can wherever you are and who you're with. I know some of you are still here in Manhattan. Some of you are at home with your families. Some were with other important people in your lives. And some of you are kind of just on your own. Wherever you are, I'm thinking of you. I'd like you to kind of just take a moment to reflect on your situation, some key things happening in your life right now, and go ahead and share those. Please make sure to keep track of this because you will be sharing this information in your Flipgrid on social justice. So if you need a moment to pause the video to write down some of those key things, please do that now. All right, now we're going to go and talk a little bit more in depth about social justice. And first, we need to kind of define what is social justice. Through the discussion boards from your peers, I'm sure you've gotten some good insight as to what social justice is. But I want to again give you a quick overview here in the presentation. So social justice is an umbrella term that includes the following concepts or ideas. First, it's really about building classroom communities of dialogue across and with difference. So it's really about developing advocacy for groups that are typically marginalized, who may sometimes suffer from not having the same treatment as others. The next bullet point here talks about critical, multicultural, and anti-bias education. The key word here is critical, in my opinion, because it's not just about having 1 or 2 celebrations based on important holidays. It's really about making sure you're thinking and purposefully using that multicultural education and that anti-bias education to promote advocacy and understanding for all. The next 2 bullet points are very similar. They focus on culturally relevant pedagogy. We talked about this a lot at the beginning of the semester. I've also looked at culturally responsive and competent teachers, which the courses like this and your coursework at Kansas State University, you will become those culturally responsive and competent teachers. When you go into the classroom, you'll see evidence of this in things like your anti-racist teaching and equity pedagogy. Again, we're taking this to a depth much more than what we've had in the past. When you are focusing on anti-racist teaching, it becomes something that's embedded in your pedagogy. Anti-oppressive teacher education also kind of looks at that issue along with critical literacy practices. And then finally, one of the most important things is really to think about disability rights, ableism, and access to academics for students with disabilities. So this defines what social justice is and what it means to us as educators. So we're going to take that concept and move forward and look a little bit more at our news and how we can build on our understanding of social justice. So we're going to watch a documentary. It's located in your Week 15 course module titled A Walk in My Shoes, Social Justice and Education. As you watch the video, please go ahead and add to your T-chart notes on now the right-hand side. And what I want you to do is bullet 2 to 4 key insights on this side of your T-chart based on your learnings from the video. And remember, you are going to need to share these in your Flipgrid on social justice, so please make sure you take notes as you watch the documentary. All right, now what I'd like to do is make this a little bit more relevant to what it is that we've been dealing with and living through the past month or so. So let's look at social justice in terms of the impacts of COVID-19. I'm going to focus mostly on the educational impacts related to social justice, but I want you to think about some of these things and think about specific implications or connections to your own community, your own schools you've been working with, schools that maybe you went to. So let's start out by looking at a statistic here. 35% of low-income households with school-aged children don't have high-speed internet. This gap is greater for African American and Hispanic families. So if we think about that, we know the rush has been for educators K through 12, even at the university level, to move everything to online, to promote that education so we don't lose contact with our students. But when we think about 35% of households with school-aged children not even having access to internet, that's not going to work, that online approach. Also, when we think about the lack of technology, a lot of students might have more access to things like an iPhone or a phone, but to be able to do coursework on that isn't going to work for those students when they're asked to engage and do Zoom sessions and complete papers when they just have a phone is not really fair. So thinking about not only access to internet, but the technology tools to support that is a big issue, even though there has been increased initiatives and funding for things like getting iPads and computers to students who need them. But it's a long process and it's not going to be something we can resolve in just a week or two. We also have parents who don't have the luxury to stay at home. Even though a lot of us have been under stay-at-home order, some families have parents who are essential workers who are considered mandatory that they be at work. So they're out working, not at home to be able to support their students doing schoolwork. They may be scared for their own lives or their family's lives because they're worried about bringing something back to them. So you have this issue of compounding concerns when it comes to access. It also has concerns coming to income and health. One of the kind of dilemmas we're looking at as an educational system as well is the fact that we have online learning versus learning packets. So a lot of districts are either kind of doing one or the other, or some are trying to maybe do both, knowing that not all students have access. But again, what is the equity with that? Because even if you send home packets, you're assuming, number one, that the parents are there to help support getting those done. Number two, that the parents speak English to get those done. Number three, that the packets have been picked up and are going to be turned back in. But if you have parents from low-income housing who don't have access to cars, who don't have access to transportation, they may not even be able to pick up those packets, let alone know how to support students in completing those packets at home. You also have issues related to food insecurity and homelessness. A lot of our students out there rely on school lunches and the breakfast provided by schools to be able to eat once or twice a day. Now that we don't have school as a weekly routine, A lot of students are experiencing that food insecurity. And then finally, we have to think about our specialized students. For example, online learning tools must be accessible to students with disabilities. Also, students who are English language learners. They have to be compatible with the various forms of assistive technology that students might use to help them learn. So lots and lots of issues impacting students and education today, particularly under this pandemic, the concerns we're having related to COVID-19. So take a moment to think about that, process that. What have you seen? Can you connect to any of these? Have you witnessed these personally? Have educators you know shared concerns related to any of these tools? What is the impact on you? And how might you take what you've learned from this situation into your future educational practice? All right, the reason I'm asking you to really think about yourself and the implications COVID-19 has had on you is that in our book, our textbook, our author shares something called the universal obligation. And the universal obligation is what sociologist Helen Fine defines as people toward whom obligations are owed, to whom rules apply, and whose injuries call for amends. We take that we take that into practice. We think about kids every day make decisions on whether or not to act on behalf of someone else, or when someone falls into their universal obligations. Teachers make these decisions. Parents make the decisions. Employers make these decisions. So I want us to think about our universal obligation and the impact it can have not only us now in our current situation, but also in the future when we become teachers, or when you become teachers. So on the back of your T-chart, go ahead and just make these 4 circles. And we're going to think about your universal obligation. So I'll give you a second to make those 4 circles. Don't worry about the perfectness of those, whether or not they're concentric circles. Just get the idea down on paper. All right, now what I want you to do is in the first circle, I want you to write me, because it's about your universal obligation. So this is all about you, and I'm going to share what I put in my universal obligation. You're going to change that based on your universal obligation. So the next circle is about those who are closest to us. So for me, that would be my husband, my daughter, my brothers and sister, and my best friends. These are the people who are in my immediate universal obligation, those I'm most concerned about. Those I have the most contact with, those who are part of my daily universe. So take a minute to think about who that is for you. Is it parents? Is it a boyfriend? Is it a sibling? And go ahead and jot down some people that are in your first universal obligation, those that you have the closest connection to. Okay, now I want you to think about the second circle. These are also people who are important to you, but maybe you don't have daily interaction with, who aren't as close to you as that inner circle. So for me, that would be like my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my students. I do have weekly contact with you, but you're not in that immediate circle. My colleagues, my friends. These are people who are important to me, who I really care about, but aren't going to be in my daily interaction. I don't live with these people, spend time with these people, engage with these people every single day. So take a minute to think about who those people are to you and jot some names down in that third circle. All right, now we're going to go to our last circle. These are the people who, again, are part of your universe, but maybe who are a little bit more distant from you. They're part of your lives, but you don't necessarily do things on a daily basis, and they're not connected to you in as close a manner as those in your third circle. So, for example, in my case, that would be neighbors, international students I've worked with, and the community in which I live. So, take a minute to fill out that last circle and look at your universal obligation. What does your universal obligation tell you about yourself, about the things that are most important to you? All right, so now I want us to think about, when do we use our universal obligation? So when we want students to consider their own circles of trust, actions, and biases, you can do something like this activity, the universal obligation. When you want people to better understand the choices people or characters have made, so we can link it actually to other academic topics here, and I'll show you how we do that in just a minute. We can even do universal obligation activities when we read stories of upstanders, or people who decide or help to stand up no matter what the consequences. And even when we read about times in history when an individual or group of people had a choice to act, and about the implications of that choice. So if we think about education right now, this is a very important time of history. What have teachers done? What have families done? What have communities done? What have state departments done? What have key representatives in the system done? These are all things you want to think about and the implications those can have. Because that's really big and can be somewhat abstract, we're going to look at our own universal obligation and the implications of our universal obligation. So to get us thinking about this, I want to read a quick story. And in this story, we're going to kind of look at this character, the main character in the story, and what her universal obligation is. Who are the people important to her, and how does her universe shift based on a new interaction with someone they've never met? So listen to the story, think about the main character, their universal obligation, and how that might shift. And we're going to look at our own universal obligation after the story, kind of take a similar approach. So let's watch our video, or listen to our story.
Welcome to A Teacher Reads a Book. Each Kindness by Jacqueline Woodson. Illustrated by E.B. Lewis. That winter, snow fell on everything, turning the world a brilliant white. One morning, as we settled into our seats, the classroom door opened and the principal came in. She had a girl with her, and she said to us, "This is Maya." Maya looked down at the floor. I think I heard her whisper, "Hello." We all stared at her. Her coat was open, and the clothes beneath it looked old and ragged. Her shoes were spring shoes, not meant for the snow. A strap on one of them had broken. Our teacher, Ms. Albert, said, "Say good morning to our new student." But most of us were silent. The only empty seat was next to me. That's where our teacher put Maya. And on that first day, Maya turned to me and smiled. But I didn't smile back. I moved my chair, myself and my books, a little further away from her. When she looked my way, I turned to the window and stared out at the snow. And every day after that, when Maya came into the classroom, I looked away and didn't smile back. My best friends that year were Kendra and Sophie. At lunchtime, we walked around the schoolyard, our fingers laced together, whispering secrets into each other's ears. One day, while we were near the slide, Maya came over to us. She held open her hand to show us the shiny jacks and tiny red balls she'd gotten for her birthday. "It's a high bouncer," she said, but none of us wanted to play. So Maya played a game against herself. That afternoon, when we got back into the classroom, Maya whispered to me, "I bet you can't guess who the new Jacks champion of the world is." Behind me, Andrew whispered, "Chloe's got a new friend. Chloe's got a new friend." "She's not my friend," I whispered back. Weeks passed. Every day we whispered about Maya, laughing at her clothes, her shoes, the strange food she brought for lunch. Some days, Maya held out her hand to show us what she had brought to school: a deck of cards, pickup sticks, a small, tattered doll. Whenever she asked us to play, we said no. The days grew warmer and warmer. The pond thawed. Grass began growing where snow had once been. One day, Maya came to school wearing a pretty dress and fancy shoes. But the shoes and the dress looked like they'd belonged to another girl before Maya. "I have a new name for her," Kendra whispered. "Never knew. Everything she has came from a second-hand store." We all laughed. Maya stood by the fence. She was holding a jump rope, but did not come over to us to ask if we wanted to play. After a while, she folded it double, rolled the ends around each hand, and started jumping. She jumped around the whole schoolyard without stopping. She didn't look up once, just jumped, jumped, jumped. The next day, Maya's seat was empty. In the class that morning, we were talking about kindness. Ms. Albert had brought a big bowl into class and filled it with water. We all gathered around her desk and watched her drop a small stone into it. Tiny waves rippled out, away from the stone. "This is what kindness does," Ms. Albert said. "Each little thing we do goes out, like a ripple, into the world." Then Ms. Albert let us each drop a stone in as we told her what kind things we have done. Joseph had held the door for his grandmother. Kendra helped change her baby brother's diaper. Even mean old Andrew had done something. "I carried teacher's books up the stairs," he said, and Ms. Albert said it was true. I stood there, holding Ms. Albert's rock in my hand, silent. "Even small things count," Ms. Albert said gently, but I couldn't think of anything and passed the stone on. Maya didn't come to school the next day, or the day after that. Each morning I walked to school slowly, hoping this would be the day Maya returned and she'd look at me and smile. I promised myself this would be the day I smiled back. "Each kindness," Miss Albert had said, "makes the world a little bit better." But Maya's seat remained empty, and one day Miss Albert announced to the class that Maya wouldn't be coming back. Her family had to move away, Miss Albert said. Then she told us to take out our notebooks. It was time for spelling. That afternoon, I walked home alone. When I reached the pond, my throat filled with all the things I wished I had said to Maya. Each kindness I had never shown. I threw small stones into it, over and over, watching the way the water rippled out and away, out and away. Like each kindness, done and not done. Like every girl somewhere, holding a small gift out to someone, and that someone turning away from it. I watched the water ripple as the sun set through the maples, and the chance of a kindness with Maya became more and more forever gone.
I hope you like that story. Each Kindness is a very powerful story. If you haven't seen the book before or read it, I definitely recommend getting it. It's an excellent example of how the little things we can do can have an impact. So I want you to think about the kindness, or the lack of kindness in this case, that the character had, how she regretted not having more kindness to the new student, and how in this trying time and challenging time we need to think about the kindnesses we have, the kindnesses we can do to support each other and get through it. So let's go back to look at our universe of obligation. So in this story, we know that the main character realized her universe of obligation could shift. If she had done more to support the new student, she would have been what our author of our textbook calls an upstander. And upstanders are active and informed human beings who will make thoughtful and brave choices in their own lives, in their communities, and in the world. And this, in essence, this quote here, I think it really summarizes what social justice is all about. It's really about making those thoughtful and brave choices in our own lives, and really supporting those in our community, and even hopefully having a larger impact on the world. So I want you to think about how you have been an upstander during this pandemic. What have you done maybe for a family member, a friend, practicum teacher, practicum students, community member? In what ways have you been an upstander? And how has that maybe shifted your universe of obligation? So take a minute to think about that. How have you been an upstander? How will you be an upstander during this pandemic? If we think about that, our universe of obligation can shift based on this. So, for example, in my case, obviously, I said the most important people to me are my husband, my daughter, my brothers, my sister. But also people now like my aunts and uncles, my cousins, my friends, my colleagues, and even you, my students, have a renewed importance and place in my life. And you've shifted more towards the center of my universal obligation. I really feel like I need to be there to support each of these groups in a more deep and impactful way than I have in the past. Even in my outer circle, people like neighbors, community members, international students have also moved in, taken a more close place in my circle or universal obligation. So think about how in your own life, people can shift in and out, change when it comes to universal obligation, and particularly in trying times like this when it comes to social distancing and the pandemic and concerns and the unknown. And think about how all that can lead to just those little acts of kindness, little things that can embark and start you on that journey of social justice, not only for yourself and your family, but for those around you. And with that, we're going to end our session today. I hope you found it valuable. I hope you found it informative. And I hope you made some meaningful connections to your own life and own experiences. Thank you all for listening. And again, have a great week. I'm thinking of you, and I'm hoping the best for you and your families.